And welcome back. We are now having the last two concepts that we're going to look at this last segment. Concept number 4, we're calculating amounts if given percentage increase or decrease. And let's look at things to look at when we do that. 1, to increase an amount by a given percentage, 1, you find the percentage of the amount, then add it to the original amount. And 2, to decrease an amount in a given percentage, you find the percentage of the amount, then subtract it from the original amount. Remember, increase, find the percentage, and then you add. Decrease, find the percentage, and then you subtract. And let's see how we go with these examples. Now, first example, we're going to increase 120 by 10%. Let's look at this solution. We're increasing 120 by 10%. This, we said 120 over 1 because we want to find percentage. So 10% is 10 out of 100. We simplify it, we remove the zeros there. 120 times 1 would be 120. 1 times 10 will give us 10. And you have 120 out of 10, and your answer is 12. But we are not done. This is just 10% of 120. Remember, we are increasing 120 by 10%. And therefore, we're going to say, remember, we must add to the original. This would be 120 plus 12, which gives you 132. 120 is increased by 12, gives you 132. Now, this next example says, decrease 400 by 25%. Decrease 400 by 25%. The solution says, remember, 400 is decreased. Decreased, we must subtract at the end by 25%. 400 multiplied by 25%, 25 out of 100. And simplify this. You realize that 25% is actually a quarter. And 400 times 1 will give you 400. And 1 times 4 will give you 4. And your final answer will then be 100. But this is not the end. This is just 25% of 400. Now, we must remember that we should subtract this 25% from the original. Now, when you do that, you get 400 minus 100, and it gives you, yes, 300. And let's move to the next example. Increase 300 by 15%. Increase 300 by 15%. Remember, we're saying 300 increased by what? By 15%. And this is actually equals to 300 over 1 multiplied. We're only finding 15% of 300 by 15 out of 100. And quickly we can do this. Move the zeros there. And 3 times 15 will give us a 45. 1 times 1 will give us a 1, which is still a 45. And this is 15% of 300. Remember, we are increasing. So we're going to say 300 plus 45. And what does it give us? 345. So 345 is actually 300 increased by 15%. So we move to the next concept, which is our last concept for this lesson. Solving problems in context involving percentages. Let's see. This is the first example. First example says a 40-gram energy drink has the following composition: 20% of fiber, 70% of carbohydrates, 6% of protein, and 4% of fat. Calculate the mass of each part of the energy drink. Now, let's look at this pie chart to make it make sense. We've got the bigger part as carbohydrates that carries 70%. We've got fiber that carries 20%, and you've got protein that carries 6%, and finally your fat is 4%. So each one must have a portion. When we add, takes us back to the 40 grams. So we're going to find 20% of 40, 70% of 40, 6% of 40, and 4% of 40. And let's see how it goes. First part, we've got our 20% of fiber as 8 grams. Remember, what we do is say 40 multiplied by 20 out of 100, which is 20%. And we simplify it to get 8 grams. Let's move on. Carbohydrates, 70%, still 40 because it's part of the 100%. So it's 70% multiplied by the 40, and that gives us 28 grams. And we move on to the next one. Protein, 6%. And that 6% is 2 and 2 out of 5. 2 and 2 out of 5 grams. And finally, 4% of fat will give us 1 and 3 out of 5 grams. The biggest thing is, as soon as we have all these values, they must add up to 40 grams. If they don't, you must know there's something that we did wrong. So if you add 8 to 28 and 2 and 2/5 or 2 out of 5 with 1 and 3 out of 5, all these will then give us a total of 40 grams. Let's look at this example now. In a school, there are 2,000 learners. If 75% of the learners are girls, calculate the number of boys. Firstly, we're going to find 75% of 2,000. Now, what would be 75%? 75% is 75 out of 100. Of means multiply, and this would be 2,000 out of 1. And we simplify the 75 out of 100 for the sake of our calculations. There's 3 25s there, and there's 4 25s there. Now we have 2,000 out of 1. And 3 times 2,000 will give us 6,000 out of 4. We're going to continue right here. Now we then say 6,000 divided by 4 will give us 1,500. And we know we have 1,500 girls. Now we then say the school population has 2,000 learners. If we subtract 1,500 girls, how many learners would be left, and those would be boys. So we then say 2,000 subtract 1,500, it will give us 500. And we now know that we have 500 boys. And this takes us to the end of our lesson, and we'll see you next time, and it's goodbye from me for now.